All right, let's get this show on the road, baby. We good to go?
Good to go.
Awesome. Welcome to our second live podcast here at Auspicious Brewing. Thank you for being here with us. We are so excited to get started today. We're so excited to have our wonderful guests with us today. We thought it would be fun instead of I hate boring intros, and so I thought we would switch it up and introduce each other for those of you who have not met us before. But really quickly, we talk about the podcast first.
Yes.
Let's tell people what we're here.
Yeah, we definitely have seen some people here that were here last time or that actively engaged with us online. But we are the One Quick Thing podcast. We started in January after the election, thinking about ways that we could connect with our community, knowing that community is going to be our superpower moving forward. And so we have been able to meet the most incredible people, two of whom are up here with us, and so many of you in the audience. It's actually been such a dream to be doing this, more than we ever could have imagined.
It's been awesome. We started the podcast trying to answer the question, what does it actually mean to lean on your community? Everyone kept saying that, and we were just two newish moms that were I don't even know anything. What the F does that mean to lean on your community? I don't know. Let's just start asking people who seem to know. And that's led us here, and it's been really exciting. And so we love doing these shows with Auspicious. We're really grateful to them for having us here and being so supportive of what we're doing here. I'm going to introduce my co-host, Emily. So Emily is a mother of one beautiful child here in Dover, New Hampshire. We met about a year and a half ago, and she's changed my life with her zest for in community and connecting with other people. And Emily is the person who will walk into any store and make friends with the person working there. She will walk into any room and befriend you. And she inspires me all the time to be a better person. For work, she's a professional organizer. So if you need those services, hit her up, Broad Street Organizing. She's incredible. The other kind, the kind for your house. This leads to confusion a lot.
Tidy organizing.
In your home. So that's my friend Emily, and I'm so excited to have you meet my co-host.
Thank you, Marissa. Well, it is my honor to introduce you to Marissa Emanuel. While she says that we met about a year and a half ago, when I went to DM her after we first met, I realized that we had actually chatted on Instagram 8 years prior about a gluten-free recipe I had posted.
Which means I had unfollowed her at some point. So that is the awkward part.
She did not care about that apple dip anymore. But truly, not only is she just one of the most incredible people I have ever met, she's also an amazing mother, a great podcast partner and friend. She is a marketing genius for anybody here who is looking for that. But also, she inspires me so much because she is not afraid to ask questions, to get it wrong and change course. She is amazing with discourse. Whenever there are times that even we disagree as best friends, like how many chairs to bring in tonight, she listens to everybody's side. There still happen to be more chairs than I would have brought in, so you know that she's also very persuasive. But I'm just so glad to be doing this with her, and I'm so glad for all of you to meet her.
Yay. All right, and our special guests tonight, who would like to go first? This idea came because we've got a married couple that's a guest with us tonight. So we're so excited to have these two absolute icons. I think most of you in this room are already familiar with them, but let's hear it from your mouths. Josie, you want to kick us off and introduce your beautiful spouse?
I will. So this is Linds. Linds uses they, them pronouns. Linds Jakows. Linds is someone who's been organizing for over 10 years, a really long time, in actually a lot of states, but primarily New Hampshire for the last 10 or so years. Linds is most known for their work on trans advocacy, famously passing the 2018 trans non-discrimination policy that is luckily still on the books today. I would describe Linds as a very warm and thoughtful person who's very considerate and very humble and always thinking about ways that they can bring more people into the movement and really not centering themselves or their ego, but what the movement really needs, which I think we don't have enough of in the movement these days. Linds is very hardworking, very passionate, a political genius and strategist who knows the ins and outs, especially around the State House. So if you have any weird New Hampshire politics questions, Linds is probably your go-to. It never really leaves your brain, unfortunately. Yeah, I could say a lot, but I think that'll do
But
for now.
I'll cut you off for now.
I am so excited to introduce my spouse, Josie Pinto, who uses they, she pronouns. Josie is one of the most devoted reproductive justice advocates in New Hampshire. And every single day since we've met, I have just watched her spread so much infectious energy and inspiration to countless people. And she's also just such an amazing connector of people in recognizing who should meet who should be working with who, and facilitating all kinds of new connections that have so many ripple effects from what they've been doing for so many years. And they have poured so much of their blood, sweat, and tears into founding and furthering reproductive justice, and specifically the Reproductive Freedom Fund of New Hampshire, over so many years. And it's paying off and bringing so many new people into the movement. Josie is also an avid yogi, an incredible plant mom, an incredible cat mom, and I'm so excited to be in this space tonight.
Yay, a little round of applause for our friends.
We were so excited to have the two of them together because not only are they both some of the best spoken people, smartest people, but also some of the kindest and most caring people in our community. And having both of them together, two powerhouses like this, it is the most exciting conversation in the world.
We're pumped. We're so glad you guys are here. So let's give us a little bit of background for those of us who are not as familiar with your story and your work. You know, take us through a little bit of your introduction to New Hampshire politics, but also kind of how that intersects with your love story a little bit. And tell us a little bit how this dynasty began.
Ooh, so I was already living in New Hampshire for about 3 years when I met Josie. I moved here to work on a campaign getting big money out of politics, and then started working on the non-discrimination campaign in 2017. And very early 2018, I got an email that would change my life forever. Someone introduced Josie to me via email and suggested that we get a professional coffee, as Josie was a new organizer in New Hampshire. And my first thought was, oh my God, I'm about to be so busy. I have this massive campaign that I'm about to dive headfirst into. And then I looked her up on Facebook and I was like, ooh, she's pretty cute. So we started chatting. I invited her to meet in my conference room, which was in the same building. We worked right down the hall from each other for 3 months and never ran into each other. And then Josie invited me to the counter protest to the March for Life outside of Equality Health Center in Concord.
Very normal romantic first date.
You just got to learn the vibes quick. And that was like a real litmus test. So we're at the March for Life counter protest, which is always a good time. But awkwardly, I actually had a date with someone else immediately after, right across the street. And this person could not attend the protest with me because they were a reporter, and they, had to be professional, non-biased. But Linds came looking for me and actually ended up crashing our date and taking it over entirely. This poor person, I don't think got a word in. Linds situated themselves right between this person and me and just fully took over this date.
I sized up the situation. It was not meant to be.
Yeah.
Did they just sneak away and just leave you both to it, or did they stick around for the whole thing?
I think they stuck around, but I don't think we really talked after. I think it was a bit of a ghosting situation.
It was clear to them,
both
too.
ends, yeah. And then we had our professional one-on-one after work, and it very quickly turned into astrology and all of our family trauma and, the makings of a classic queer date. And I think at the end of the night, we both just kind of knew that the professional thing was, and that was a cute starting point, but it was just not where we were going to land ultimately. And so by the end of the night, which, by the way, Linds was my first queer date. I was dying to meet queer people in New Hampshire. I didn't really know where to go. And so I was a little overly eager and sick of going on dates with boys. And so I asked Linds if I could kiss them at the end of the night, and they said yes.
It was so tame. I was so nervous.
Just a little peck, but the rest is history. Yeah, we never really did the friend or professional thing. We kind of just skipped about 4 levels and went right there. So that was really refreshing, because I also just really needed a good friend. I hadn't really met a good friend yet. So I was just great, we're just going to go level up really quickly.
And you still have a good friend.
Yeah, I still have a good friend. Yeah.
So we want to get into a little bit of silly details. And so we thought of doing the newlyweds game.
Oh my God.
And so we've got these little paddles.
And we're going to do it rapid.
Let's
We're going
go.
to try to do it rapid fire as best we can so we can get into the meat of the discussion.
Fun fact, my parents actually won the newlywed game in the late 80s.
So Linds is probably going to win.
So I have this in my blood. I don't think there's any winning in this equation, but I'm ready.
All right, yeah, you've been ready forever.
Okay.
So do you feel ready? Okay, you know which? Okay. All right, so who is worse about doom scrolling? Got it.
I have to do social media for work things, so yeah,
Sometimes I just
it's part
find
of the
Linds in
job.
bed and I'm like, how long have you been here, bud? Do it.
There's always one partner that goes a little bit too hard. Okay, so which spouse is a more enthusiastic protest chanter? That was a quick one.
Oh, yeah.
It was really loud, and I'm a Gemini, which just has to be said at some point.
It always takes me a minute to warm up. I get nervous.
I'm usually got a camera, and so I can't chant too loud behind the camera.
Who makes better protest signs?
We're both
that's
being
nice.
generous. To be honest, we always show up to the protest and forget a sign, and then we're really hoping someone donates theirs to us. That's more our vibe.
That's valid. I do the same thing. Now you both are super silly gooses. Who commits to the bit more intensely? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the theater background person
love it.
in the
Noted.
relationship.
Who makes funnier activism memes?
That was easy. Linds is the meme maker of the relationship.
Perfect.
Now, this is just theoretically a metaphor, purely a metaphor. Which spouse rolls the joints or packs the bowls?
Josie rolls the most perfect joints I'd ever seen in my life. I was
the joint in my life. What are
inspired.
you talking about?
We're just speaking metaphorically, hypothetically, exactly.
Who relies heavily on getting a little treat for their mental health?
I'm a Taurus.
I think both, but Linds can get that one. Yeah.
Which spouse is more likely to convince a free stater to convert to the other side?
Linds.
I went to conservative Christian college.
You prepared.
Born for it.
Who is first on the dance floor?
I'm a dancer.
I love that. Which spouse is more likely to suggest Irish exiting from the party?
Yeah.
All right, keep an eye
I
on
always want
Linds.
to say my goodbyes.
I'm like, everybody knows that we're going home to our cats. It's fine.
Who's the first to apologize after an argument?
Linds is a stubborn one, I'd say.
And which spouse follows New Hampshire politics more closely?
I'm tapped out.
Yeah, Josie's retired from electoral politics.
I let Linds tell me what I need to know most of the time.
Which spouse is more likely to get an impulsive tattoo?
Josie's gotten so
I
many.
think I got 5 in the series of 6 months after
gotta
Roe
catch
fell.
up.
I feel like I went on a really deep dive getting inspo for these questions, and I think that was one where I like saw a tattoo from like 2018, and I was
She
like,
was in
"That's
the
a good
vault,
question."
so that.
I went real deep.
Committed.
My turn.
Yep.
Who drags the other spouse out of the house on like a Friday? Nice.
Okay.
I'm the outgoing one.
I would be under blankets so much more if not for Josie.
It's true.
Who is a hopeless romantic?
I have the poems to prove
Liz
it.
is a poet, and so early days there were a lot of poems.
Early days.
Early days. I know. It's true. Slacking.
Which spouse would leave society and start a goat sanctuary?
Question.
I
That's
feel
literally Linds's
personally
stream.
attacked.
Who is the first to get into debates in a comment section?
I'm gonna give Linds this one. I'm a lurker a little bit more online.
I don't really debate in the comments section, but
You are just getting
I get in
You'll get in
there
there.
sometimes.
Linz is on TikTok now, so make sure you follow them.
Welcome.
And I'm gonna skip that one.
Yeah.
We're just gonna do the last one. Who remembers every anniversary, even the weird ones? Like, yeah.
Linds can give you a detailed chronological order of our entire relationship.
Do you want to know what happened on January 31st, 2018? Ask me after. Ask me during the break.
Literally.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, that's so
beautiful.
funny. Well, thank you for playing with us.
was
Thank you for
fun.
allowing me to get to
Thanks.
know you a little bit better.
Yay, class. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
All right, so I do want to give this like as much time as we need. So let's like get into kind of the meat of it. We reached out to you guys and asked you to do the show with us a couple months ago, and right away you responded, and you guys were both like, yes, and we know exactly what we want to talk about. And we were like, amazing, because we don't know anything. So like, let's go. So we are going to have an interesting conversation today talking about sort of the attacks we're seeing on both trans rights, reproductive rights. And can you talk a little bit, just to get us started, about how you've seen that reflect itself in both of your work individually, and like how you guys started to talk about that crossover?
I can start. Yeah, I was the one who was like, Marissa, I know exactly what we need to talk about, because it's something that's been on my mind a lot recently, which is that I feel like, with abortion rights and when Roe was overturned, we had this really big outrage moment where people mobilized and they donated, and a lot of people were paying attention and really, really fired up. And it's just, I really want to see that exact same energy when it comes to trans rights, because I think the two issues are incredibly linked, which we'll talk a lot about tonight. And I was just really hoping to be able to use this conversation as a chance to draw those connections and hopefully convince people that were really, really mad when Roe v. Wade was overturned that they should be just as mad, if not more mad right now.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about bodily autonomy. You should be able to control your own body and life, and the same people are attacking both of those same rights. It is a perfect circle of the people that are attacking abortion rights and who are attacking trans rights, whether it's at the state or national level. And so we need to be absolutely united in that fight.
So if anybody is new to this, can you give us some historical context on this conversation?
Totally. So if you actually look back to the 1970s, Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. If you look slightly before that, white evangelicals were actually not that concerned about abortion either way, or shortly around that time. They actually chose that issue really strategically because as they were more concerned with segregation in schools. And when they started losing that fight at the court level, they realized that being anti-abortion would get them to the same political electoral goals in terms of stacking the Supreme Court, or to achieve their goals with regard to segregation. There was a Supreme Court case in the early 70s that said that universities had to desegregate if they were going to keep their tax exempt status. And a lot of the leaders of the Christian right white Christian nationalist leaders, meaning people that basically want a theocracy in which only the right kinds of Christians have outsized political power over everyone else, and everyone else is essentially a second-class citizen. They were really upset about how that Supreme Court ruling affected universities like Liberty University, Bob Jones University, and they started actively picking a fight around abortion to achieve those same goals in much the same way as anti-trans people once, and marriage equality was legalized nationally by the Supreme Court in 2015. And they saw that moment and said, okay, we have to, now that we have a majority of the country that approves of gay marriage, we need to find a new set of people to attack. And we can get there by specifically attacking transgender people for strategic purposes.
It's so you can literally look back through history and map the targets of these the religious right, and they've understood that they can't be successful without somebody that they're making the villain, right? And so it's like you just see them continue to shift focus throughout history.
Yeah, in the 80s, we saw a real rise in clinic violence, where we saw bomb threats to clinics, arson, attacks on healthcare workers and providers especially. So yet again, we're seeing this really explicit targeting of the people providing the care. And yeah, just those incidents in general we see on the rise again. It's also really interesting, the lead plaintiff behind Roe v. Wade, Norma McCorvey, was actually converted to be pro-life by the right, and she became sort of a person they paraded around to go on speaking tours talking about why she was actually opposed to Roe v. Wade. I really think that that's actually a really similar strategy as we're seeing right now with the detransitioners, because they're picking these people out from random states. I have yet to meet one from New Hampshire going to the State House. They're flying them to New Hampshire to come testify in these bills, even though they have no connection with New Hampshire, because there's only a couple of them that they've hand-selected to come speak about these issues.
And really throughout the modern LGBTQ movement, we've seen this dynamic of cisgender, meaning non-transgender, lesbian, gay, bisexual people, telling trans people, or you need to wait your turn. We need to get our rights first before we're ready to have the conversation about you. And this started really after the Stonewall riots. It's with an activist group that was working to get New York City to be one of the first cities to pass a non-discrimination ordinance for employment. And they told a lot of the leaders at Stonewall, who were transgender women of color, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, to wait your turn and not make it too complicated about trans rights, when they could have educated and increased understanding about what it means to be transgender at the very same time. But they were told to not be too loud about trans rights, and we're going to get our non-discrimination and protections first. And we saw this as again and again throughout the 90s and early 2000s, with an outsized focus on marriage equality, and also the first employee non-discrimination acts that were introduced as federally, where they took out protections for transgender people at the expense and still didn't pass the bill.
So these patterns we're seeing are not new. Can you talk about the choice to focus on bathrooms and sports as entry points for this?
Totally. So before I get into bathrooms, I want to really take a moment and celebrate the work of the 2018 non-discrimination campaign. So that made New Hampshire become the 17th state to pass as an update to our non-discrimination law that said that transgender people are explicitly protected from discrimination in employment, housing, and public spaces. So that's like a public bathroom, that's like anywhere, any business that's generally open to the public. And I want to be very clear that that did not end discrimination in New Hampshire. It is still extremely difficult to sue under non-discrimination laws if you don't have the time and money to go forward with an expensive lawsuit. And so a lot of people are still left out from being protected by those laws. But it wasn't like the right just dreamed up the bathroom thing. It was specifically a response to the progress that was made through passing non-discrimination laws. And they cried wolf about how people would be attacked by people pretending to be transgender or in the bathrooms. And we just kept saying again and again, this is not happening in other states where we've passed these laws. And we actually included a line in the bill that said, like, you're not this doesn't cover anyone who's like pretending to be trans for any nefarious purpose, which doesn't ever happen anyways. It's a completely invented thing. But this idea of the fake bathroom predator or myth was largely really opposed by the business community in the late 2010s. North Carolina had a bill, HB2, that was a bathroom ban, and the business community really came out in supportive of that and made it really unpopular to spread that idea to other states. So we saw other states where governors who were certainly not friends of the community were just as not willing to go to bat for the bathroom banner side, because as they saw how unpopular it was and they saw how much litigation they would be met with at that moment. And so really it's a reaction to the progress that we've made, and it's a completely invented myth to spread fear and hate toward a community that just wants to exist.
And I'll just add, I think the thing that makes me really sad with this stuff is that these are just kids going to school. And I've had the pleasure of meeting some of these kids, and, you know, they have so much pressure to be so well spoken and even like miss school to come testify at the state house. But the fact of the matter is they shouldn't have to. They should not have to go to school board meetings after hours or feel weird using a bathroom or worry about joining a soccer team. Like, these are just things that kids should get to do, and were something that, you know, was a normal part of my experience as a kid that now they don't get to have. And so I just always want to acknowledge what we've really taken from them in terms of like having a safe and comfortable school environment.
Totally. Piggybacking a little bit on what you said about sports, the sports issue was also really designed in a right-wing policy lab to be the next frontier against trans people after marriage equality passed in 2015. And I actually made a TikTok about this. There is a guy named Terry Schilling of the American Principles Project, which clearly has no principles, but it really did a lot of polling around a lot of really unfair language around so-called men and women's sports, specifically to exploit unfamiliarity with what it means to be a trans kid. So after we passed all these non-discrimination laws, more and more people were starting to learn about what it looked like and meant to be a trans adult. But fewer people were familiar with what it looked like to be a young person who knows themselves well enough and is confident enough and supported enough by their family to say, I am trans and I want to be treated as a girl or a boy or non-binary in school, respectively. And so they really took advantage of that unfamiliarity with a smaller set of trans people, kids, and then an even smaller set that's looking to play sports.
We're, you know, like I said, Emily and I are both parents, and I think that speaks to me especially heavily as a parent, and it just like makes me devastated. Like, it's devastating to think about kids that are just trying to go to school or play sports or like live a normal like life and are being faced with this kind of challenge. And so I call that out specifically to like encourage parents who are in the room to be especially mindful of this, because this is being done intentionally to like manipulate and prey on those parenting instincts of like, oh, my kid is in danger. And I know those of us who are in the room know that that's obviously not true, right? But it's incumbent upon us to be the ones that when we're in our play groups or we're at a sports game or whatever, and we hear these little things start coming up, to shut them down quickly, because the unfamiliarity piece, I think, is also important, where sometimes people just haven't encountered, you're right, like a child who understands that they're trans. And so it's our job, I think, to be extremely vocal about that and push back and provide that familiarity. Can we talk a little bit about how both of these issues are really, when we boil them down, we're talking about bodily autonomy and what those overlaps look like?
Yeah. So I have this really nice visual of like a chart about this that if anyone wants, let me know. But basically, you know, like we said, they're coming after bodily autonomy through banning abortion or banning gender affirming care. With abortion, their purpose is for more cis white women to reproduce so that the white population increases, because their goal is to raise white children in a conservative, fundamentalist Christian nuclear families. And then alternatively, with banning gender affirming care, they want to remove LGBTQ people from public life and mainstream culture, which maintains and reinforces a gender binary with cis men in power. And both of these things are really, you know, adding towards the common goal of like a thriving imperialist white supremacist cis hetero patriarchy, which I know is all the buzzwords, but you know, it's really like they have this clear vision, and people having abortions and people getting gender affirming care, aka people doing what the fuck they want with their bodies and making their own decisions, is a real threat to their bottom line.
Yeah, I'll just say on gender affirming care, there's so much misinformation that has so much funding behind it right now that is trying to confuse the heck out of ordinary people who are maybe working multiple jobs, just figuring out how to afford their daily lives. As they want you to be really, really confused and really, really skeptical about gender affirming care, which is just health care. Or gender affirming care can be anything from puberty blockers for a trans kid to your dad taking testosterone in whatever stage of life that he's at because he has low T. Or I know a lot of friends who I've had who have gotten pregnant have been prescribed estrogen after pregnancy for all sorts of reasons. A lot of breast cancer survivors receive hormone replacement therapy in some way. And so gender affirming care is really this massive umbrella that a lot of people can fit into, not just trans people. And I'm certainly happy to walk people through what it looks like for a trans person of any age start, what the path looks like when being prescribed a gender affirming care. But you also don't actually have to be an expert and know every single stage of that process to know that these decisions are being made by young people and their parents and their doctors, and is a very, very slow process. I myself got top surgery when I was 25, almost 26. I had to do it before then so that I could use my mom's health insurance, which made it a lot more affordable. So the overall cost was around $8,000, and it was around $4,000 after insurance. And I was not making a ton of money at that time. I saved every single penny I could the year going up to it to be able to make that work, to be running up against the deadline. And for young people, that process is even slower. I had to go to a year of therapy to be able to get a letter from my therapist as to the surgeon. And it is not a quick and easy process by any means. I've never met a trans person who said, oh, I wish that process would have been slower or had more hoops to jump through. But again, you don't have to be an expert or to know that it all comes down to bodily autonomy, and it's not your decision to make for anybody else what they do with their healthcare, their gender, their lives. And so just going back to those principles whenever you're in a conversation with somebody who doesn't understand gender affirming care is really, really important.
And the thing is, we're undermining these experts. People go to med school for a really long time to be able to do things like provide abortion care and prescribe hormones, and they know a lot. And then we have politicians, especially like in states like New Hampshire, where they are just like normal people, most of which are not doctors and have like very normal jobs, that are stepping over the authority of these people that have spent a lot of time learning these things and saying that they know better. I think that just can't be understated enough. Is like Lynn says, we have processes for when minors need abortion care. Actually, not that I'm a fan of this law, here in New Hampshire, you need parental consent. Like, they need to be notified unless you get a judicial bypass, which is a really hard process for young people to go through. And similarly with anything like puberty blockers or hormones, they're not getting that without parental notification or consent. And so a lot of youth are forced to wait until they turn 18 and are able to make those decisions for themselves. So there's already very clear processes in place here. We don't need to undermine them.
Yeah. So clearly the groups that are lobbying against trans rights and reproductive health are really relying heavily on misinformation and fear, essentially. So who are these groups?
Ooh. I love researching our opposition. It is fascinating, if it wasn't so horrifying. The Heritage Foundation is one big name that you might be familiar with as the architects of Project 2025. They are definitely behind a whole lot of this. There's also Alliance Defending Freedom, which is only defending a very narrow definition of freedom for white Christian nationalists. They are basically on the opposite side of every fight that the ACLU is on, if get the gist from that. They are currently are working on a national sports ban case that is going up to the Supreme Court this coming term. And so next June, we will have a ruling from the Supreme Court on the sports issue federally, unfortunately. Here in New Hampshire, there's a group called Cornerstone that lobbies regularly at the State House. They claim to speak for all Christians in the state, which I know that the New Hampshire Council of Churches and many other Christians have a very different view on that. And they were among the first to try to spread the bathroom predator myth all the way back in 2017 when we first started working on the non-discrimination and case. And then there is a relatively new group called the LGBT Courage Coalition, which again does not have a lot of courage.
The names are so deceptive.
I wonder why.
They're literally preying on people to not Google what they do. When you say things like, "Oh, we're for freedom," this is what I fight in the comments with people about.
The nice guy group.
Yeah, the LGBT Courage Coalition is really they leave out the T on purpose. They are trying to not only say that trans people are not real, but that people are forcing otherwise gay kids to become trans. They use language like transing gay kids. And they even compare it to conversion therapy, gender affirming care. So they are really, really extreme out there. And they are the ones bringing in detransitioners to not only New Hampshire State House, but other state houses in the Northeast, like Maine. Fortunately, Maine did not pass any harmful anti-trans legislation this past term, which is really good. However, they're trying to claim that there's a civil war in our community between the LGBs and the T, which is not actually happening. Most LGBT people support trans people, but it is a civil war that they are trying to stoke the fires and fan the flames of every day, and we need to call it out when we see it.
The nastiest part about that group to me is that they are masquerading as allies, and that is just disheartening.
It's like there's this disingenuous thing that's happening that and I'm sure you guys see this in your work all the time. We didn't talk about this, but I had a conversation with somebody recently who approached me with good intent, but they were doing that, right? They were doing that thing where they were like, well, I just don't understand. And I was like, I'll understand it. I'll help you understand. And then by the time you get into it, you're like, wait the fuck a minute. Like, what are you doing? So it's really insidious and it can get you, you know?
Yeah.
There's so much concern trolling. They really like to pretend they have our best interests at heart when it's anything but. I've seen state reps get up and say how puberty blockers are a threat to bone density in young people, as if but then why are they banning it only for trans kids and not cis kids who are going through precocious puberty if that was a real concern? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, they love to find like one doctor that will sign off on something. We've been seeing this for a long time with abortion, that abortion can lead to really bad mental health. It actually alleviates mental health for a lot of folks because they're relieved of their situation. Or we have the classic case of the abortion pill reversal, which is people standing outside of abortion clinics saying, hey, I know you just took that pill, but you can actually still reverse it, and here's how. Like, there's so much, and they'll have like one study that was like debunked forever ago that they'll constantly cite. Even the New York Times has done this for trans stuff. They've like cited really old studies that have like fully been debunked. So it's actually really pervasive, not just in like right-wing media, but like what we consider mainstream media.
Our own like media literacy is so important with all of this stuff too, and like really understanding how to actually fact check, which I know becomes like harder and harder, but for people who aren't paying close attention, it's important to like really make sure you understand what you're hearing. I want to talk about how these are issues that we can really easily map back to like the broader patterns we're seeing in authoritarian situations, similar to the one that we're in now. With this sort of divide and conquer mentality. And talk a little bit about kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think these bans just follow these really similar patterns by making this care unavailable for individuals in these particular states, and then people are forced to travel for that care, find care through another mechanism, or just forego the care altogether. You know, people are sometimes detransitioning because they simply can't access these resources anymore. And so we see the same disingenuous and medically inaccurate arguments put forth by those supporting both the anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ bills. And again, it's the same lawmakers that just don't want people to be able to make decisions about their pregnancies, and also don't want trans people to be able to make decisions about their medical care. And so again, it kind of goes back to that like flow chart I was talking about. And it's just all part of control. They ultimately, at the end of the day, want to control you and your body and what you do with it because it gives them power. And we have so much power when we are able to control our bodies. It's as simple as that.
They also really want us fighting a culture war so that we don't fight the bigger class war that they're trying to distract us from. They don't. Yeah, you can clap for that. They want us pointing the finger at our trans neighbors and saying, and they are the problem, they are responsible for everything bad in the world, instead of pointing the finger at wealth inequality, at CEO pay going way up and the bottom 40% of the wealth is just expanding and expanding. They want us to be fighting each other and fighting smaller and smaller groups of people and scapegoating them so that we don't actually band together and solve these bigger problems that impact why we can't afford housing or groceries or healthcare in general. And we need to be calling that out for what it is.
Exactly. When you really step back and think about it, these people think the biggest problems facing our society are who you pee next to and what young people are participating in school sports. Like, when you really think about that just on like a base level, it's so wild because, like Lynn said, like most of us can barely pay our rent and are like facing like real actual issues. And it's like, honestly, you're so privileged if those are like the two things that are going through your mind on a day-to-day level as like problems in our society, because I don't know about you all, but those things don't really come up for me in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that this is a distraction. And so even though it is a distraction with this legislation coming up, we're seeing incremental chipping away of rights for folks. Like, how can we explain that? Or can you explain that?
I'll start because I think this is something we see a lot with the repro space. And it's really just that it's so much easier for them to get away with this incremental chip. And I think New Hampshire in particular being the purple, I call actually red now, state that we are, it doesn't seem so wild when they propose something like a 24-week abortion ban. They're like, hey, that's 6 months. That's actually pretty good. Don't you want to agree to that? And so the people agree and say, okay, sure, we can get this on the books. And then all of a sudden, the next session, they're introducing a 20-week abortion ban. The session after that, it's a 15-week abortion ban. And each time what they're doing is hoping that we don't notice that it's this slow chip away and hoping that they can do the work to make that idea popular enough that we don't notice it. And I think Linds can explain how they're doing that exact same thing, especially here in New Hampshire with trans rights.
Yeah, so last summer, then Governor Chris Sununu signed a ban on bottom surgery for trans girls under the age of 18, which is a thing that happens extremely rarely. I've only ever heard of 2 girls who are 17 going on 18 who were supported by their families, whose families had enough money for that procedure, going out of state, not in New Hampshire, to be able to get surgery before they went off to college, to be able to recover at home, to not have to miss school. It's extremely rare. I can count on one hand the number of people I'm aware of, and I have met so many trans kids and their families. But they started off with the thing that happens almost never, chipping away at that and banning it. And then what did they come back with the next year? A ban on puberty blockers and hormones for young people. And thankfully, just, to clear up any misinformation, thankfully we worked really hard to get a continuing care clause so that young people who were already patients receiving puberty blockers or hormones are able to continue with that care and will not be affected by that ban going into effect January 1st. So that was really important harm reduction for those young people, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to see state reps try to roll that back as well in upcoming sessions. And every state that has passed bans for trans youth healthcare has then raised the bar to, your brain isn't fully developed until you're 26. And so you're not actually able to make that decision at that point. And I made that decision when I was 25, almost 26. It was the best money I'd ever spent on myself in my entire life. I have zero regrets. And but somehow I still have to show up in front of a committee of strangers, state reps, and bare my soul and talk about that whole process as to complete strangers who think that they know my body better than I do.
I think the important thing here is if we give an inch, they'll take a mile. And so I think what we're really asking folks is to be really fierce, even for these things that sound wild, like bottom surgeries for minors. Oh, wow, yeah, I get there's Democrats who were yeah, I agree with that. And that's the exact point is they want you to so that they can chip away. And so I think we just really need folks to recognize that when it's happening. And even if it is something that isn't happening or extremely rare, again, we can't give them that because they're just going to keep winning gradually over time, especially in a state like here.
Absolutely. We have to and we have I think you alluded to this. We have so many reps. There's such a small ratio.
400.
Right. So 400 reps, if you're calling your rep every day, that's annoying as fuck. You can get through to these people, you can really make progress by bothering them. So with that in mind, what do you want people in this room to bring to the conversations that they're having in real life about these issues? We're obviously in such a heated moment. What do you want people to walk away from this when we're having those conversations, whether it's with family members that we don't really like, or whoever the case may be, running into somebody from high school? What do you want people to keep in mind?
So the number one thing that changes people's hearts and minds are focusing on values and lived experience. If it was just a matter of having all of the facts on your side, we would have already won, and we haven't. So I really encourage people to do more personal digging about what are your values that and are the reason why you support bodily autonomy in all of its forms, and what are the personal experiences, whether it's meeting someone who's trans, your best friend, a family member, or other life experiences like having an abortion that really shaped you and the way that you think about these things way more than doing a bunch of research on everything that a trans kid could possibly go through when seeking gender affirming care. Also, I would really encourage people to look into election results in New Hampshire. There are so many districts that come down to like 200 votes, which is easily flippable. And if you live in a town like Dover that is deep blue, is probably, knock on wood, going to always have Democratic reps. It's certainly not enough to just have people with a D next to their name. We need to make sure that they actually reflect our values. But if you live in a place where your state reps are completely on board with what you believe, think about looking a few towns over and what are the districts that maybe came down to a couple hundred votes. Can you reach out to people in those towns, encourage people you know who would make great candidates to run? People usually need to be asked like 3 or more times to consider running before they're ready to do that. Or you can sign up to just knock doors in that district and hopefully have an impact. This is super easy to look up on the Secretary of State's office, but elections are definitely not the end all be all. We need to be having these conversations with the people that we can actually influence in our circles. And so if you have someone in your life, an aunt, an uncle, a friend you went to high school with who is like, I don't know, I read this really confusing thing in the New York Times about trans healthcare. I don't really know what to believe. I can't keep up with the 50 terrible headlines every day. Have that conversation about your values and your personal experiences with them, because you, as somebody who knows them, who knows where they're coming from, you are going to be having way more of an impact on them than somebody who is out just making a TikTok about their own trans experience who they don't know personally.
And it's not just Congress or the State House. I think sometimes we hyper focus on those things. These fights are being fought at like school boards. Like, I'm so proud that our local Dover school district is like actively engaged in a lawsuit in support of trans students. So I really want people to know that you can actually usually have a bigger impact at the local level than you're gonna ever have getting through to people like Chris Pappas. And so I just would love for people to, really think more hyper local in their approach. And I think, just to reiterate what I said earlier, like, I think the repro movement, I don't want to say lucky is a weird word, but we had this really big moment where a lot of people were mobilized and outraged and took action and donated and showed up to the rallies and did all those things. I think talking about trans rights is, going back to the last question, it has been this more incremental chip, bill by bill. We did have a Supreme Court case, but it only really was about Tennessee. It didn't have this huge nationwide impact immediately. And so I think, again, I'm just really asking folks to channel that same level of rage and action and donating and doing all the things when it comes to this issue, because it really, really needs your attention, your monetary support, whatever you can give it.
I think you both hit some really great points, especially about when, Linds, you said that politics are not the end all be all. And I think that kind of encompasses our whole conversation, that the politics are important. There are so many things, so many call outs that we've had that we can do, but that mutual aid and community are so extremely important. And obviously it's something that we are all actively engaging in, and everybody here is actively engaging in. Is there anything that you would say as we wrap up, any of the other parts of mutual aid that you find is the most important to this community, and any call outs that folks could engage in?
Sure. In a former life, I was a political director of an organization. I was worked really hard on both Bernie's races. I was really engaged in getting young people out to vote. And honestly, with 2020 and Biden winning and COVID starting, I had a real reckoning that politicians aren't going to save us, and that I was pouring all this time and energy into trying to elect these people who frankly never win. And if they do, they never really follow up with the things that they said they were going to do. And what that revelation really taught me was that, like, we need to be the people that do the things that politicians say that they're going to do. And that was really what prompted me to start Repro Fund. New Hampshire didn't have an abortion fund at the time, and I knew from my work at Equality Health Center as a clinic worker that there was just this really huge financial need. I would leave my job and every day, and people would tell me, like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it, and I didn't really have a lot I could say to help them. And it was really like that work day in and day out that made me realize, like, I actually can do this. I was 21 years old. I had literally no idea what I was doing, but I was an organizer, and I knew I could get the people in the room that did know stuff that I didn't know. And it took 2 years, but from that point on, from about 2019 to 2021, we built Repro Fund from the ground up. We launched in 2021, and we have now given out over $900,000 for more than 1,600 patients. Yeah. So, like, we can do that. Like, we can actually put money in people's hands. There's another great organization, the New Hampshire Mutual Aid and Relief Fund. You can actually come walk into Auspicious and donate stuff to them anytime you want in that bin over there. And they give that out to the houseless community every single week. There are a lot of people already doing this work. I know I did build an organization, but a lot of times you don't have to do that. You can just plug into all these existing efforts and organizations, because I promise you there are people doing it. Just like find your people, find the cause, and go help them.
I think that's such an important point, and I talk to people all the time on social media specifically that are like very tuned into the drama of what's playing out at a federal level right now, and it's addicting, right? It's like we're all watching this unfold, and it's important, right? We do need to be paying attention to it, but it's also putting people in this place of, I can't do anything, I'm in overwhelm, I'm in my house, I'm doom scrolling, I'm miserable, I'm alone, I live in a rural community, I'm the only person who feels like this. And while that is all very real, I think that, like, to y'all's point, like, once you start engaging and get involved in an org, start engaging in this work in any way, you're going to feel better, and you're not going to feel that dread in the same way, because you said this, we save us, right? Like, we're saving us. We have to be the support that we need. And so we can't all just sitting around pointing fingers at whoever. Like, we have to get up and start building that community that we want to see. So we are going to start to wind down. For me, I think taking from this conversation is, like, I'm always trying to think about how can I show up better in these conversations that we're having in our normal lives. And I loved what you were saying about a lot of this being them intentionally dividing us to distract from the fact that what we should be doing is having a class war, and we're having a culture war instead, and that's not helping anybody. It's doing literally nothing beneficial. And so I'm going to continue beating that drum, and hopefully, like, when people bring that stuff up, that's one of my first go-tos is, like, we shouldn't even be talking about this. I don't need to be an expert in trans, like, to you saying this, I don't need to know every detail about what happens when somebody transitions, because it's none of my effing business. And, like, I don't need to know that. That's between you and your doctor and the parent if there's a child involved. So those are some of my kind of takeaways. And then, Emily, what do you think?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is always that there's a personal story below whatever the policy is or the lobbying is against. And like you were saying, Linds, just sort of that they already have the facts. They've heard the facts, and it's not going to change their minds. But what changes their minds is human beings that they know or that you know, or, a story about you and how it's changed your life. And that's the only way that we're going to get through, is because we're all humans at the end of the day. We're not policies.
I love that. So hit us with some CTAs. What do you want us to leave with? What do you want us to do? Tell us where to go. We are all paying attention, and we'll do whatever you tell us to.
I love that. So really exciting update with the Reproductive Freedom Fund of New Hampshire is we actually just explicitly expanded our mission and vision statement to include gender affirming care. Yeah, it's something we've been doing for a long time, but we really wanted to like get on paper and like make really official, especially in this moment. And so I do have just like 2 calls to action around our queer care fund specifically, which right now the Queer Care Fund funds gender affirming care at 2 independent clinics that we were already funding abortion care at, the Lovering Health Center right here in Greenland and Equality Health Center in Concord. And so the 2 action items on all of your tables, there's 2 QR codes you can scan. One of them is to sign up to be a volunteer driver with us. So a lot of times patients struggle to actually get to and from their appointments, especially if they don't have, supportive people in their lives that they can ask. Isolation is a huge barrier for a lot of trans people. And so you can drive patients. And just like Marissa and Emily said, like, it's a really feel-good thing. You get to like be a tangible reason why they get to and from their appointments. And so that's a program we're launching. We already have a lot of people signed up for abortion rides. We have about 70 drivers, but we haven't been able to get that same amount to show up for gender affirming care. So that's one. And then second, you can actually just donate to our queer care fund. And those donations will be directly split between those 2 health centers. And it's a really cool model. We just give the money to the health centers and we say like, use it however you see fit. If that's a copay, if that's a blood work, like we don't care. You use it however you need to make sure people get the care that they need. And so we're really excited to continue to, have those offerings increase.
And you're taking signups too today, right? You've got a whole
you can get on our
station over here,
listserv. Yeah, I do have a little station if you want free Plan B, birth control, zines, pregnancy tests. Please take whatever. It's all free.
Woo!
No, seriously, take them because our house is literally a
So true. I don't
Plan
need them.
B
We're married.
zine and making operation at all times.
Not allowed to come home.
I know a home organizer.
We might hit you up on that. So my call to action is something that is incredibly timely. I made a TikTok about it today. Right now in Congress and the U.S. Senate, they are fighting around a massive federal spending bill, and it's actually looking like the government is going to shut down at midnight tonight because the House and the Senate cannot agree to the same version. And there's a lot of bad stuff in the bill, but one of the major things that they're trying to sneak in are, you guessed it, anti-trans attacks, including a federal trans healthcare ban, or taking away all federal spending that goes to hospitals that perform gender affirming care for trans people. There's also provisions that would end or funding for Medicaid and Medicare services that support trans healthcare, as well as other provisions that would harm queer foster youth, stop pride flags from being put in federal buildings, because why not? I called Pappas, Shaheen, and Hassan this morning around 11, and their staff could not tell me if they were going to stand up to those anti-trans amendments. That is not okay. And I haven't heard from anyone else who's called today otherwise. So this is going to be a long fight. It's not going to be over today. There's going to be many, many, many more rounds of negotiations. There's also a ton of horrible anti-immigrant things in those bills. So there's lots and lots more reasons to oppose those spending bills and to try to get people who have our back to actually negotiate and not negotiate our rights away like we're disposable. Because if trans people are disposable, if immigrants are disposable, more and more people are going to be considered disposable. So call either Chris Pappas or Maggie Goodlander, respective of which congressional district you're in, and then Shaheen and Hassan represent the whole state. So call both of them, and are happy to refer to my TikTok. Marissa has tagged me in a bunch of the content for this, so you can find me Londs _____.
And you had a whole script, which makes it so easy. I mean, we don't even have to think about our social anxiety while calling them. It's already just written there for you.
I think Josie said this earlier, that just because there's a D next to somebody's name doesn't mean that they're good enough. And just because I love everyone's so quick to nod on that. Fuck yeah, not good enough. So please call them and let them know that. I think that, like, we were talking about how the federal stuff is a much bigger hill to climb, but it is still important because they need to hear from us. They're trying to get reelected, and what they don't realize is, like, people are coming for their seats. There's progressives that are coming for those seats, and they're smart, capable people who are willing to go to the mat for these issues. And so let them know. Call them and let them know you're willing to vote for somebody else. Anything else from you? Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as Marissa said, that we are both parents. And one thing that I say to my child a lot is that I hope she is proud of herself, because there's so many times, at least, you know, in our childhood where we were told that somebody was proud of us, but being proud of yourself is really what, like, fuels you forward. And so I want to say to both of you, but everybody here, like, I really genuinely hope that you are proud of yourself, not only for showing up, because it's so easy to be silent. It's so easy to be complacent. And as Jay and Helen said in their post today, you know, the people that are not going to back down are going to come today. And I just hope that every single person knows that they're making an impact, even by showing up, even by listening with an open mind, and fighting the bullshit.
Yay. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to our guests.
Thanks
you guys. I think some of us are going to go outside because I thought this is where you're going. It's toddler 6 season. So I'm going to go chat. I'd love to chat with everyone, but I'm probably going to step out on the patio. And yeah, let's hang out, get some drinks. Again, tip your bartenders. Thank you guys so much. And let's get a round of applause for our amazing guests.
And thank you, Auspicious, for having us again.
We love you.
Thank you, Auspicious.
You.
We
Best
love you
place in the
guys.
world.
Tip them again.
Give them all your money
Tip them more.
and transfer it.